Thanks. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, my name is David, David Sierra. I'm a graduating senior in Columbia College. Completed my thesis through the Institute of Research on Women, Gender, and Sexuality across the street. But also want to just say a huge thank you to Barnard at WGSS and to the Barnard Center for Research on Women, who have been amazing, nurturing, fostering centers of study and care and community for me. My thesis today is entitled Transit Ascent, as you can see, Trans Aesthetics and the Politics of Organization. I want to also start off with a few things. I want to ground in things, just first off. That's why I'm starting with these. But to Jack Halberstam, who isn't here today, who advised my thesis, to Christina Mercer and Patricia Daly for overlooking and helping out in the thesis seminars, and then to folks at Earwags, especially Khadija Belli, for always organizing things, and to Sharon Harris over at the Institute for Research in African American Studies, and then also to all of my friends who are here in the audience today, and all of the professors and instructors who have been so generous and loving. So let's get started. So as I'm starting with the transitive, how does this work this way? Yep, okay, so we're going to start with transitivity. Just a little bit of a grammar lesson, as one of my favorite professors, Tina Kemp, has taught me to start with a lot of things. So transitivity, grammatically thinking about something that can take a direct object, right? But then transposing transitivity into philosophical discourse kind of moves into something that's a bit more receptive and a bit more fluid than something that just takes a direct object or is on the receiving end as an othering end. When it's transposed into more expansive terms, transitivity in my theories and in the way that I've been trying to work through it might allow for a more expansive and more caring practice towards gender and gendering and practicing transness, practicing political transness, practicing a political entanglement with transness and all of the subsidiary and corollary identities that are connected. As we're moving from transitivity, I really want to move into practice. As you might have noticed, I was talking about it a lot. Michel Desserteau writes, "Many everyday practices are tactical in character." My project aspires to enact practices of tactical operations, lexical and syntactical analyses, sensorial engagements, embodied knowledges, and political critiques. These pillars support a diffused examination of logics, rhetorics, and choreographies of organization and movement, including minoritarian gestures wrought through the transitive sense, passing out of itself, passing over to or affecting something else, operating beyond itself. A tactic, a calculus, which cannot count on a proper or spatial or institutional localization, as Desserteau notes. A strategy, he notes, however, assumes a place that can be circumscribed as proper, also proper in the French sense, to tidy, to clean, to correct as a verb, and thus serves as the basis for generating relations with an exterior distinct from its competitors and adversaries, clienteles, targets, or objects of research. Political, economic, and scientific rationality have been constructed on this strategic model. Management and administration operate as two modes of state strategy in the projects of nation building, maintenance, and expansion. Administrative violence is a significatory expression used in Dean Spade's development of his framework of a critical trans politics. This is a particular frame for understanding how processes of gendered racialization are congealed in violent institutions. This line of thinking and organizing is informed by critical race theory's critiques of legal reform and specifically anti-discrimination laws, and has important links to analyses developed by fat politics and disability politics, where norms about body and health are identified and critiqued. Administrative violence operates through those registers which mark quotidian yet determining events. Administrative violence encompasses those calculated procedural actions of the state underwritten by juridical authority and sovereign discipline. Through this disciplinary reiteration of liberal governance and administrative violence, autonomous subjectivity, bodily sovereignty, and suspicion of xenobiotics in bodies are all dogmatically and interdependently maintained. The work of maintenance is carried out through operations which, as Jasri Puar asserts, in relation to transnormative medical discourses and modes of becoming and thinking with the work of Mao Chen, piece bodies together, or create bodies with or without new organs. The matrix body, by way of medical individuation and its discourses produced by Enlightenment thought, is yoked in synecdoche to the state. Persistent individuation disciplines bodies into possessive subjects, expressive actors, and volitional constituents of the state. The state choreography operates through prescriptive approaches to embodiment, codifying bodies as single or enclosed forms, simultaneously able to stand in for, be heard by, affect change to or in, and expand the state. There is a binary manufacture between individual and population, which might be defined as a generalized abstraction, signifying a collection of bodies to be regulated. The individual within the population is subject to will, rationality, or juridical status, which Hagar Kotef notes as subject abstraction in her book Movement and the Ordering of Freedom on Liberal Governances of Mobility. Abstraction, then, transitively, also produces populations. The word population is deployed in state rhetorics primarily through administrative, juridical, economic, and military procedures. Populations, bodies of bodies, through their production, necessitate management. The technology which transposes bodies of bodies into populations to be managed is, Kotef points out, movement. Regulated movement is a technology of citizenship or subjectivity through which plurality becomes a body, a social movement, an empire, a state, as orchestrated collective movement. The strategic rationalizations of management are those I take tactical aim at in tracing those logics, rhetorics, and choreographies of organization deployed by neoliberal states and their constituent institutions. I take my own medications as the point from which I began my theoretical and artistic analysis. I began medical transition in fall 2017 and quickly discovered at that point that estradiol, synthetic estrogen used for medical transition, is manufactured in and distributed by Teva Pharmaceuticals, the world's largest generic drug corporation based, operated, and owned in Israel. Okay, so this part is going to be a bit more improv. I just wanted to read a bit of the prose that I'd actually put hours into writing for all of you. But tracing is a concept that I've been working through as I've been talking about these state choreographies, right? Like these movements and developments that states put together to regulate population. I'm thinking about that, thinking about the ways that we might be able to subvert or revert or divert those things, right? So the ability to use tracing then maybe as a kind of a counterproductive mode to the state, right? Using tracing to figure out what's happening, using tracing to figure out the choreographies that the state is making before they make those choreographies. So I'm thinking about normative power then as I have next to it. Normative power developing through the establishing and regulation of norms. How those norms are producing then those populations that I was talking about earlier, right? So the states and those norms within those states are using technologies of incorporation then. So I'm thinking about how capitalism, for instance, as a system, continually works to incorporate modes of relationality and connectivity into it to capitalize off of those modes of connectivity and relationality. So how then can we create other modes that evade that? Are we able to create other modes that evade that as minoritarian individuals, as trans people, as people who are targeted by the state in different ways? Those are the things that I'm just trying to work through theoretically. But then I got to reading Testo Junkie by Paul Preciado. And in Testo Junkie, one of the assertions that I found that stuck out to me quite a bit was the assertion that bodies are resistant and resistive at a molecular level, which I kind of disagree with. And so I took that to point and wanted to deconstruct and reconstruct some arguments around it. And what I got to then was thinking about circulation. So this is Twitter. These are some of my tweets from my Twitter, which is a fake Twitter. Princess Die High, at Queer Negativity, if you want to follow me, I won't accept. So I asked rhetorically, question time, does anyone else get at least a little fucked up about the fact that I basically have a completely different body than 9 months ago because of flammable synthetic catalysts floating around my circulatory system? what the fuck? Also, there's an artist who graduated from Columbia University named Sarah Serpa who takes estradiol and puts it all over things and then sets those things on fire, which is really cool. So Andrea responded, "We are chemical reactions floating in stardust." I responded a gif of a penguin falling over into the ice. That was my reaction. And it obviously was a silly exchange a couple weeks ago as I was preparing for another event talk thing that I was doing, but it really prompted me to think about circulation and movement in ways that might connect to quantum physics and ways that might connect to space and spatiality. And I got really excited, and then I had to pull myself back like I always do when I'm researching things and try to figure out what was a manageable topic to actually take on. And then I moved into actually analyzing my own pills and the way that they circulate through my body when I take them every morning. So these are the pills that I take. Estradiol, which is synthetic estrogen, as I said, and then spironolactone and sertraline, which is the generic word for Zoloft, because a girl is depressed on this campus. So from there, I just want to talk a little bit about what those pills are doing, right? So estrogen, when it enters a body, is also an organic material. These pills aren't just things that disseminate throughout my body. They're things that have their own lifespans in my body. They have their own bodies. They have their own moving and changing parts to them, and my body affects them just as they affect my body. So one thing that I found out that has been really, really affected by estradiol is this thing called fascia, not fascism, fascia. And fascia is this weird collagen-type substance that is kind of just all around. It is like the interstitial parts of our bodies. Like it's the stuff that keeps our organs like up in our bodies. Otherwise, they would just kind of fall and like sink to our feet, right? They are these weird little cells that are really connective. People don't really know exactly how they are connecting different things within a body, but they keep it together. So then I was like, wow, these things are actual just like support systems that we have in our bodies. And I thought that was really cool and like really lovely and poetic, but obviously there's also a bad side to everything. And the fascia in my body is always moving around, especially with, your fascia is also moving around, sorry about it. But especially with estrogen, the fascia that is on my face, that's under my skin, that's moving around my hips and my butt, it's all moving. And it sounds painful, and it kind of is, but like in a way that's pretty prolonged, right? In a way that's just something that you learn to live with as a pain that kind of emerges one week over a span of time that you don't really notice, and then you just learn to move through it. So all of these things are to say, as I move onward from my pills, is that the existence of matter, right, of the existence of molecules, as Preciado asserts that they're resistant, I don't think that that existence is necessarily inherently resistant or resistive to anything. So I'm thinking about the existence of material not being important in this, but the mode of its organization. The mode by which that organization then codes it as transgressive or repressive, regulatory or liberatory. Not to say that each of these are discrete categories, but more specifically that material oscillates elastically through and between categories imposed upon them. 1 minute? So as we keep going, I then take up gender as an analytic category through all of these things, naturally, because I'm talking about hormones and my own transness. So as I'm talking about gender, I'm using all of these tracing kind of methodologies that I've developed to interrogate these main categories: etymology, visuality, nomenclature, taxonomies, and prescriptions. Gender itself, in a certain way, is this Enlightenment discourse, right? It's produced as a norm in that discourse, and then is dominant through that discourse, is a hegemony. So I was just tracing how gender works through words, and different words that we deploy around gender and what those mean. Then I moved to visuality, because we code people through visuality when it comes to gender often, right? People pass or don't pass because of visuality. people are able to be legible or illegible because of visuality. Then to nomenclature, which is a more specific mode of naming. Nomenclature as a scientific method developed in the Enlightenment, so deconstructing that and figuring out ways that we might leverage nomenclature politically, and then we could also continue to critique nomenclature. Taxonomies as, again, a little categorically different from nomenclature, and then prescriptions, talking about prescriptive approaches to embodiment, to gender, and then my own medical prescriptions as well. So that is most of my thesis, and I would like to